Every player wants to improve. We all grind, we all practice, and we all study what the pros are doing. But the truth is, most players never break out of the just being average phase. It's not because they don't have the mechanics. It's not because they don't understand the basics. The real reason is one simple skill that almost nobody talks about, and that is adaptability. Today, I want to break down why adaptability is the difference between staying stuck and actually climbing to that next level. And more importantly, how you can start building it into your own gameplay. So the first thing I want to talk about is the trap of average players. Here's the thing about average players. They don't usually realize they're average. They know the rules of the game, they've practiced the same combos or strategies over and over again, and for a while, it works. They win some matches, they feel confident, and they think they got it all figured out. But here's where the trap sets in. Average players start relying on routines instead of awareness. They keep repeating the same moves over and over. They do the same rotations, make the same decisions because it feels safe. It feels like playing correctly. But the moment the game throws them something unexpected, maybe it's a strategy they haven't seen. Maybe the enemy's playing at a faster pace, or maybe it's just a completely off meta matchup that you're going against, and suddenly they freeze. Suddenly their safe play isn't safe at all, and the whole thing just kind of falls apart. That is why so many players plateau. It's not that they aren't skilled, it's that they've locked themselves inside a box where they're comfortable, and they don't know how to step outside of it until a situation demands it. That's what separates average players from great players. Great players don't cling to routines, they adapt. So the second thing I want to talk about is the great player difference. When you watch a truly great player, it almost looks like they're playing a completely different game. The speed, the decisions, the way they react, it all just feels so effortlessly. But here's the secret. It's not about being faster or stronger or have godlike aim. What makes them different is their adaptability. A great player treats every match like a living, breathing thing. They don't just execute a plan and hope it works. They're constantly checking, adjusting, and shifting based on what's actually happening. If their first plan fails, they don't panic. They don't double down on something that clearly isn't working. They pivot. They experiment. They find a way to fit into the chaos instead of fighting against it. This is why you'll rarely see great players get tilted the same way average players do. When things go wrong for the average players, they think, oh man, my team just sucks, or man, this isn't fair, or my team's throwing. But a great player doesn't waste time blaming. They immediately ask, okay, what's the next best move? They are solution focused, not excuse focused. And the thing is, the difference shows up in the smallest moments. It might be choosing to wait a few extra seconds before making a push. It might be recognizing that the pace of the game has shifted and is slowing themselves down to match it. Or it might be as simple as breaking out of autopilot and realizing what worked last match isn't working here. Great players understand that skill isn't just about execution, it's about recognition, the ability to see what's really happening instead of just repeating what's comfortable. That's the difference. That's the skill gap you feel when you play against someone who just seems unstoppable. It's not that they're better at everything, it's that they're better at adjusting to anything. So the next thing I want to talk about is adaptability in practice. So what does adaptability actually look like in a real match? Because it's easy to talk about it in theory, but in practice, it feels a little different. Adaptability isn't some flashy, dramatic play you pull off once in a while. It's a series of small decisions stacked on top of each other. It's being willing to say, all right, this isn't working, so let me try something else. Sometimes it's as simple as breaking your own habits. If you're normally playing aggressive, adaptability might mean holding back and waiting for the right moment instead of forcing something. If you're usually defensive, it might mean recognizing that playing too safe is costing your team and deciding to take that calculated risk. Another way adaptability shows up is in how you respond to setbacks. Average players let mistakes spiral. One bad fight turns into frustration, and frustration leads to even more mistakes. But a great player sees the mistake, accepts it, and immediately shifts gears. They treat every failure as new information, not a reason to give up. And the key here is that adaptability isn't random guessing. It's not just switching strategies at random because you're frustrated. It's intentional. It's reading the flow of the match and asking yourself, what's working, what's not, and what could I do differently right now to change the outcome? When you start thinking like this, your gameplay feels completely different. Suddenly, you're not stuck repeating the same mistakes or relying on the same one-dimensional style. You're adjusting, you're experimenting, and you're always moving toward what works instead of being trapped in what's comfortable. That's adaptability in practice, not one big moment, but dozens of small choices that add up to a massive difference. So for my next point, it's why adaptability feels unnatural. Here's the thing. Adaptability sounds simple, but it doesn't always feel natural. And that's because your brain is wired to stick to routines. When you find a style of play that's comfortable, your instincts keep pulling you back to it, even if it's not working. That's why so many players plateau. They know what should be done, but in the heat of the moment, they fall back on old habits because it feels safe. And ironically, what feels safe is usually what's holding them back. Adaptability forces you out of that comfort zone. It asks you to play in a way that feels awkward at first, slower than maybe you're used to, or more aggressive than you're used to. It's uncomfortable, and your brain interprets something discomfort as wrong, even though it's actually growth. So if adaptability feels unnatural to you, that's not a bad sign, and that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. That's the signal that you're stretching your limits, that you're not stuck in autopilot anymore. And the players who lean into that discomfort are the ones who end up making the biggest leaps forward. So for my last talking point here, it's building adaptability into your mindset. Adaptability isn't just a switch you flip on during a game. It's a mindset you build over time, piece by piece, match by match. And the first step to building that mindset is awareness. You have to start noticing the difference between playing out of habit and playing with intention. Ask yourself, am I pushing forward because it's genuinely the best move in this situation? Or am I just pushing forward just because that's what I always do? That tiny moment of awareness, catching yourself in the act, is where adaptability begins. The second step is reflection, and this part is where most players stop because it takes effort. After every game, whether it's a win or lose, just take 30 seconds to ask yourself, where could I have shifted my approach? Maybe you have a lead and kept playing aggressive instead of tightening up and securing it. Maybe you were behind and played too cautious instead of taking the risk you needed. These little reflections don't just help you understand past games, they train your brain to recognize those same situations where they come up again. Over time, that reflection builds into a kind of instinct. So in the middle of the action, you start seeing options you've never even noticed before. And then comes intention, the part that turns awareness and reflection into real growth. Intention means stepping into every match with the goal of practicing adaptability itself, not just trying to win, but trying to notice when the situation is shifting and actually responding to it. Maybe that means changing how you position. Maybe it's altering how aggressive you are. Maybe it's even pulling back and letting your teammates take the lead for a moment. At first, it's gonna feel messy. You'll try things that don't work, and sometimes you'll lose because of it. But that's the point. You're not just practicing a game, you're practicing adaptability. And here's the thing, when adaptability becomes a part of your mindset, you stop being locked into one way of playing. You stop playing predictable. You stop being the kind of player who can only succeed if the game unfolds in a certain way. Instead, you become the player who could bend with the flow of the match, who can adjust to chaos, who can lead a team through uncertainty. That's the difference between an average player who knows a few strategies and a great player who could thrive in any situation. And if that's the kind of player you want to become, then this is the path. But here's the thing, adaptability isn't flashy. Nobody's going to cheer when you make all the small adjustments mid-game. Nobody's going to notice that you took a different angle or played the matchup differently than usual. But you know what? You'll notice. You'll feel the difference. And over time, that difference adds up until one day you realize you're not just reacting to the game anymore. You're the one controlling it. That's the separation between good and great. Good players rely on comfort. Great players rely on adaptability. And if you start building that muscle now, if you start training your brain to see possibilities instead of patterns, you'll be ready for any situation this game throws at you. So the next time you load into a match, don't think just about winning. Think about adjusting. Think about what the situation is asking from you and how you can rise to it. Because once you do that, you can adapt at will, because there is no limit to how far you can climb. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you want more content that dives deeper than just surface level tips, stick around. That's what this channel is all about. I'll keep challenging you to see the game differently, to think differently, and to grow into the player you know you could be. So hit subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment about the last time you caught yourself adapting mid-game. And as always, thanks for spending your time here with me, and I'll see you in the next one.